Alright fellas, the other day I was browsing Twitter when I came across a video of prospect Callum Walsh competing. I've heard of the name before, but I've never really watched any of his fights. So when I was watching the clip, I wonder if the same thing stands out to you. Yeah, the UFC Fight Pass logo on the canvas. This is a reasonably big fight. Freddie Roach is in the corner, but the UFC decals are in the ring? How haven't I heard of this? I swore Dana White said he was never going to get into boxing promoting. Well, I guess I was somewhat wrong. And let's have a look at how this happened and just what's going on with the UFC and boxing. Now, the UFC has always been trying to set itself apart from boxing. The rivalry between boxing and MMA has always been strong.
Fighting. What Ultimate Fighting is a sport of fighting. What you guys don't understand, you guys are a dying breed. You boxing guys, oh, it's humans cockfighting. What you don't understand is your sport is getting swallowed. It's getting swallowed by a greater, more efficient, more spectacular sport. Hey, it's not it's slowly getting swallowed. The famous people.
However, Dana White, who himself is an ex-boxing instructor, has clearly always had a fond spot for boxing. Even choosing to watch, say, Bivol v Canelo over a co-main event at UFC 268. He's always flirted with the idea of potentially entering the world of boxing promoting.
You doing the UFC, have you thought about venturing in to boxing territory to just show what you can do? Have you thought about that? Are you entertaining that?
Absolutely, 100%. And we're working on that right now as we speak.
The closest and largest boxing event he's ever had his hands on was the crossover between McGregor and Mayweather, where he co-promoted with Steven Espinoza. Yet ideally for Dana, I would imagine he would want to have a monopoly on boxing similar to the UFC. However, this isn't going to happen. There are too many belt organizations, too many promoters, and too many random third parties with enough money to sway any fighter, like the Saudis. Boxers know what they're worth and sometimes overvaluate that. But Dana would struggle to hold them down to a UFC-esque contract. That's why, to my surprise, I saw the UFC Fight Pass logo in the middle of the ring, and I was like, what's going on? I haven't heard about this. The UFC is making their move into boxing? Well, UFC Fight Pass isn't something I'm too familiar with. There just isn't anything on there which gets me overly interested to buy the pass. So what's crept under the radar for myself and probably a lot of other boxing enthusiasts is that UFC Fight Pass has been broadcasting these Hollywood fight nights, which are promoted by a bloke named Tom Loeffler. Here's what Dana White had to say about him.
See some great fights. Tom Loeffler's the promoter. I fly out to every one of his cards in LA. Best matchmaker, best promoter. His fights are stacked with great fights. It's like the UFC cards, but boxing. Those are the type of fights that this guy puts on. It's on live on Fight Pass tomorrow. Check it out.
Tom seems to have a bit of history in boxing, working with James Toney, the Klitschko brothers, and more recently helping to promote Triple G and develop him into an international superstar. He additionally seems to have a business relationship with Serhiy Bohachuk, who's a Ukrainian boxer who just won the WBC interim super welterweight title against Brian Mendoza on the Zoo Fundora prelims. He might be managing him, but he also seemed to be Hollywood Fight Night's first name they pushed before the recent Dana intervention. Now, Tom's latest venture in the last few years has been with his company 360 Promotions, and they're hosting these Hollywood Fight Night boxing events. From what I can see of the earlier fight cards for the UFC Fight Pass, it at least seems like filler content. Local matchups which no one really cares about, but hey, it's something to just fill content on the Fight Pass. However, lately this is beginning to change. Dana White is becoming more significantly involved and inviting his celebrity friends to the events. Why is this the case? Well, it's because he seems to have signed a young and upcoming Irish prospect in Callum Walsh. Now, Callum Walsh is no slouch, a genuine solid Irish prospect at super welterweight. Walsh has fought on these Fight Pass fights a few times now, yet all of a sudden he's showing up at UFC events, UFC press conferences, and it seems like Dana is starting to really push him. What shows they're making moves to me is Walsh's latest fight. Just to prove this, thinking back to what Dana said earlier.
This guy doesn't take on any, guys with lopsided records. He takes on real dudes and he knocks him the out. I fly out to every one of his cards in LA. Best matchmaker, best promoter. His fights are stacked with great fights. It's like the UFC cards, but boxing. Those are the type of fights that this guy puts on.
As a fight fan and a consumer, there's not a single fight on this card I would really even want to watch, or buy a ticket to. However, this fight took place at Madison Square Garden, and it seems like they're starting to invest in Walsh, and with another TKO win under his belt, they've hinted to bigger and further events on the horizon. For Dana White and the UFC, Walsh could be seen as Dana's first forte into promoting a legitimate boxing prospect, and not just a UFC fighter crossing over. If Walsh gets to a high enough level, it could push giants such as PBC, Top Rank, or even Matchroom into discussions with Dana White, and that's where it really could get interesting. But what is even more interesting is the time of this play. Look at the boxing landscape currently. It's probably one of the most troubled positions that it's been in ages. You have Showtime pulling out the end of last year, the ESPN Top Rank deal being questioned, and looking debatable if ESPN will pull out, gimmick fights gaining more and more attraction, and while some of the biggest fights are only being made because of Saudi money. So with all this going on, Dana White is probably sitting back and especially keeping an eye on the ESPN deal with Top Rank, as the UFC also have a deal with ESPN. So soon, once that deal expires or comes up for renegotiation, will Dana White slide into that position? Will the UFC finally launch their boxing division competitor? At least for the moment, I don't think Dana will actually make a move, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Dana sign more prospect boxers. He seems to be caught up in a lot of passion projects recently, with Power Slap being the absolute biggest of them all. So boxing could just be another side mission for him. The UFC is currently expanding into things like grappling matches, where we see fighters such as Sean Strickland participate. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the UFC elevate the Hollywood Fight Nights to some sort of UFC boxing division in the near future. Now I want to hear what you guys think. Did you know about Dana and Walsh? Do you think the UFC will enter the boxing game properly? And just any other thoughts down below. Anyway, thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.